Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going back to the year 1995, very specifically November 13th, 1995, when we saw the arrest of a certain individual named Glen Rogers. Now, he has a few claims to fame that have been spanning a number of years, and they've been spread all across the internet for a variety of reasons. Even if we weren't talking about some of the things that we'll mention about connections to the O.J. Simpson case, Glen Rogers was a serial killer. He operated in the early 90s, and he committed some despicable murders. But the thing that's really kind of triggered a lot of, firestorming, if for lack of a better term, is the possibility that Glen Rogers could indeed be the perpetrator in the O.J. Simpson, I can't say the O.J. Simpson murders, the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman back in 1994. Now, we're going to discuss this theory, but please stay tuned to the end because we'll give, just something to say at the end as well, so please stay tuned. The thing with Glen Rogers is, he was an individual that had a very traumatic childhood. He was born in Ohio but lived in many places, as including Mississippi. He grew up in just a sort of very problematic lifestyle. He was the victim of abuse, beatings. He watched his father beat his mother. He was introduced to stealing at a very young age, but his brother even remarked that Glen would do things that he would not do. And he would kind of take things just a little bit further. There was even an incident when Glen was exposed to toxic waste. I mean, countless things that were going wrong. Malnutrition, poor living conditions, abusive family, so many things. That's just the kind of nutshell version. But to say some things about this is just that, of course, there's the documentary, My Brother the Serial Killer, which is available on YouTube for free, which features a series of interviews with Glen Rogers' siblings, Clay Rogers and Sue Rogers, and they're talking all about their brother. To tie this into the O.J. Simpson case, they both reported that Glen Rogers told them that he knew Nicole Brown Simpson prior to the murders in 1994. Prior to the murders, they said, hey, I'm hanging out with this woman. Yeah, her name's Nicole. She's the wife of some football player. Oh, it turns out his name's O.J. Simpson. He was talking about her. What was he doing in Los Angeles? Well, it was very normal for Glen Rogers to move around the country. For a while, he worked kind of with the carnival circuit, but he also just developed a job as a house painter. And in some places, they talk about him being a handyman. He might have even done some handiwork for Nicole Brown Simpson. But their acquaintanceship escalated into some sort of friendship and even dating. By that, I mean they had drinks together on at least 2 occasions and such. So the point is, he's interacting with Nicole Brown Simpson. Serial killer interacting with Nicole Brown Simpson, and then she goes murdered. Serial killer in Nicole Brown Simpson's personal life, and then she gets murdered. And this ties into a lot of the things revolving the sort of O.J. truther movement, because the biggest thing that they put forward is the blood evidence and the DNA that ties O.J. Simpson to this case was planted. Who planted it? Well, Philip Van Adder planted the blood evidence. What about the gloves? That whole thing? Mark Furman was behind that one. Is that the individuals that are involved with the investigation instantly wanted to go after O.J. Simpson. Why him? What axe to grind do they have with O.J.? Well, Mark Furman knew Nicole Brown Simpson, and he met her multiple times, even to the point where he had made comments about her breast implants, her breast augmentation, said he liked her boob job. He knew who she was, and he had met O.J. Simpson in the 1980s during a domestic dispute when he was working at a different angle of law enforcement. I mean, this stuff is documented, so there was a definitive connection between Nicole Brown Simpson and Mark Furman. Notice how some people just become the epicenter of absolutely horrendous, horrible luck. That's the thing that I've just said about Nicole Brown Simpson. Her days were numbered. And I mean, if these witness statements are true, 2 witnesses have come forward and said that Glen Rogers knew Nicole Brown Simpson prior to the murders. If he had nothing to support it, I would just be like, it's no big deal. This guy's just some serial killer rotting on death row. He needed to make something up to get a little bit of attention or something like that. But, I mean, the fact that his siblings have come forward and they say definitively he said that he knew Nicole Brown Simpson, and this ties into other things, that he even talked about the murder. And, like, he even talked about the murder to these two individuals. One of the bizarre things that I do confess watching, the documentary that I just cited, and just listening to other people make like the sort of commentary about Clay Rogers and Glen Rogers' sister Sue, is that they both seem very sort of kind of nonchalant about their brother confessing murders to them. Oh yeah, well I guess I better have done something about that because Glen was confessing all these murders to me, so I better come forward. I don't know, just I get some kind of bizarre vibes coming from that. But this is all kind of tying into a very consistent narrative that, I mean, there's also something that is very important to note about the kind of OJ Truth movement. There was allegedly a phone call that was made at 11 p.m. from Nicole Brown Simpson to her mother. And why is that important? Because at 11 p.m. on the night of the murders, O.J. Simpson was in a limousine going to the airport, and he couldn't have possibly been at Bundy to commit that. That would leave like kind of a bigger opportunity for somebody like Rogers. But the thing is that, I mean, O.J. Simpson even sued the phone company, and I believe that was the year 2000, but it might have been 2001, so can't really quote me on the date. But this was covered by George Stephanopoulos, ABC News. I mean, O.J. Simpson did indeed file the lawsuit to get the records of the phone company. The judge dismissed it. He said it was a frivolous lawsuit. But the thing is, though, why would O.J. Simpson file, the lawsuit to get the records of the phone company if he actually committed the murders? Why would he do that if he'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, well, this completely cements your guilt? Why would he try and just expose it to the entire world? I know double jeopardy. I know that he wouldn't be able to be tried for them, but why would he try and, put his neck out there if he actually if he had actually done it, if he had actually committed the murders? Why go through the trouble of finding phone records that would be evidence against him if he hadn't actually done it? Or is this evidence that O.J. was not the perpetrator and it was somebody like Glen Rogers? There's a very sort of long, complicated theory involved that something about O.J. Simpson hired Glen Rogers to go into Nicole Brown Simpson's apartment to retrieve, or no, sorry, it's not an apartment, her home, to retrieve a pair of earrings that were valued at $20,000, as well as other things with jewelry. I don't want to comment on that now, because I don't think that that's the heart and soul of the issue. What I think the heart and soul of the issue is, they're saying that O.J. did not commit the murders. I mean, that O.J. did not do the stabbings, and that's the thing that I want to focus on. Because you think about this, and it's like, the way that Glen Rogers described the killings of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman was that he began a confrontation with Ron Goldman. He pulled the knife on him. I mean, because Ron Goldman shows up, right? He's not supposed to be there. Nicole Brown Simpson forgot her glasses at the restaurant La Mezzaluna, so Ron Goldman's trying to bring them to her. And they get into the confrontation. He sees this guy there. They just stare down, and then that erupts into the physical altercation. Nicole Brown Simpson comes over. Glen Rogers says he stabbed her one time as kind of a stun move, and then he goes back, stabs Ron Goldman some more, the famous forklifting thing where he puts the knife into him, lifts him off the ground, and continues to stab him. Then he goes back to Nicole Brown Simpson and slits her throat. Okay, so and he actually gave a very specific statement about that. He slit her throat to put her out of her misery as fast as possible, as quickly as possible. All right, so that's the explanation that is provided for that, about why the murders took place the way they did, and just to explain all of the evidence that was involved with that. Once again, blood evidence was planted by Van Adder, and Mark Furman was associated with planting the gloves. Now, there's an interesting thing to say about Mark Furman planting like the kind of bloody glove that was dropped under the sort of area, the bloody glove thing. You know what that is. Okay, and Lionel from Lionel Nation talked about this and said Mark Furman could not have planted any evidence because he didn't know where O.J. Simpson was at the time. What if he tried to plant evidence and then just say, oh, well, O.J. Simpson must have done it, but he didn't know where O.J. Simpson was. What if O.J. Simpson had been in Brazil? This is Lionel's quote. And my only response to that is, Mark Furman is not that smart. And also, I mean, look at Mark Furman on the stand. Did you tamper with any of the evidence in this investigation? I reserve the right to use my Fifth Amendment privilege. Even to that question, if he hadn't tampered with any of the evidence, why didn't he say, no, I did not? I mean, like, if that was something that he genuinely had not done, probably would have saved himself a lot of career reputation destruction if he hadn't presented it that way. So the sort of the narrative of the O.J. Truth movement really seems to center on the police kind of just came up with this instant vendetta against O.J. Simpson. Not to say that he was a good person. In fact, he was a really bad person because of all the think of all the domestic violence that Nicole Brown Simpson went through. I mean, you can hear him on the 911 call freaking out in the background. It's like she's saying she's gonna get beaten up soon. Okay, so violent tendency, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he committed these very specific murders. Now, like, the thing is, though, they're saying that Mark Fuhrman had an axe to grind against O.J. Simpson, so he just went after him, and all the focus went on him. All the media attention went to O.J. Simpson, but in reality, this was the actions of a serial killer who knew Nicole Brown Simpson prior to her death. And as we see, though, I mean, very clearly, Glen Rogers was not apprehended until November of 1995, meaning that he was in the L.A. area. He was going out for drinks with Nicole Brown Simpson, and like multiple people can confirm that. It's not just like his brother saying this, or it's not just that his sister's saying this. You have two different people saying definitively that this happened, and he gave very specific details about the murder to them, and he gave very specific details about the murder to the investigators, like as a recreation. Of course, that happened many, many years later. But the thing is, though, with this whole sort of Glen Rogers theory, it's just like, were the police really so set on damning O.J. Simpson, on condemning O.J. Simpson, and just making this into the more sensational kind of media storm that it was? I mean, the media definitely wanted it to be O.J. They didn't want it to be Glen Rogers. I mean, nobody knew who Glen Rogers was at the time, other than the people who had interacted with him in his personal life, which was next to no one in comparison to somebody like O.J. They wanted to vilify him. And as you see, Mark Fuhrman, I believe he has something to do with hating people who are not exactly like him. I think there's something about that, for lack of a better term. And O.J. Simpson's own words, though, during the verdict, when they gave the verdict and he was found not guilty, he said if he had been looking at Van Adder, he would have lost it. Why would he lose it? Because he believed that Van Adder planted the blood evidence. And I have one big thing to say about the blood evidence, and that is, if there is any genuine blood evidence in the Bronco, O.J. Simpson committed the murders and he left blood evidence behind in the Bronco? What about this Charlie person he talks about in the book If I Did It? What about somebody like Jason Simpson? O.J. left blood evidence in the Bronco and he goes on to Chicago. Why didn't he say, hey, Charlie, by the way, when I'm in Chicago, you see all this blood evidence from the murder that you just witnessed? Oh, yeah, please clean it up. You ever heard of this thing called soap and water? Yeah, please get out there and some bleach, maybe ammonia, destroy any possibility of anyone noticing this blood evidence. No, he just goes to Chicago and leaves it all behind. If not Charlie, Jason Simpson, Jason, you got to do one thing for me. Clean that blood out of that Bronco and don't ever ask me any questions. No, he just goes to Chicago and leaves it all behind. His DNA, Ron Goldman's DNA, Nicole Brown Simpson's DNA, all of it was available to the investigators. That's just something that's been like kind of puzzling me lately. Why were they able to obtain so much blood and DNA evidence that is very visible? You can see the photos of it for yourself. You can see how visible it was. And to the credit of the Martin Sheen documentary, they really showed how each piece could have come into play. But I would just say, though, our line of counterbalance at the time. Where is the evidence that this was Glen Rogers? Where is his DNA? Where is the unknown hair fiber? Where is the scrap of clothing that he could identify? Where is the physical evidence that would connect him to the crime scene? Where is the kind of like the boot print? Where is the sort of the kind of fingerprints that they couldn't deal anything with, that we actually have definitive certainty of? And a lot of the people are going to say, well, there was, but the evidence has been lost. Well, I can't accept that. If the evidence has been lost, where is it? I mean, there really is something to say about this. There is a narrative that is just also perhaps a little bit more compelling that O.J. Simpson did indeed commit these murders. But I would like you to just to ask you, what do you think is more plausible? Everything that we just laid forward, and or do you think it is the kind of the more mainstream narrative is what happened, that O.J. Simpson committed these murders? He acted alone. He got into a scuffle with Ron Goldman. Ron Goldman pulled his glove off, so O.J. cut his finger open. He's stabbing Ron Goldman multiple times. There's also the theory just that OJ lost the knit cap and he had to remove the glove, and he's just feeling around in the dark for the knit cap, but he can't find it. He's lost the glove. He just has to get out of there, and that's the reason for it. But what do you think about that? And furthermore, where is the well? Just I would say it again. Where's the physical evidence of Glen Rogers being the murderer, serial killer Glen Rogers? And do you believe the statements that are brought forward by his family? Moreover, we have OJ's DNA at the crime scene. We have the Bruno Mali shoe print at the crime scene. We have countless pieces of evidence. The knit cap, the gloves. If it doesn't fit, it must have quit, whatever. The glove shrank, you know it. Frozen to preserve DNA evidence. And there are things that tie OJ to the scene, but I don't see anything that ties Glen Rogers. What do you have to say? Drop a comment below, and until next time.